through hunting, fishing, trapping, and outdoor recreation. It is very important to us to promote sound science-based natural resources management. And it's very important for us to protect the rights of the public and our members to hunt, fish, and trap. And we're working here every day on the ground in a variety of different ways to do all of those things. We do everything from hosting a youth camp that has a specific conservation focus, that has everything from inland fishing to big game hunting to conservation connection camps. We do youth publications, we do adult publications and education. And one of our core focuses, though, is on advocacy. And so every day we're there on the ground at the legislature talking about issues that could impact our ability to, protect our conservation heritage and to promote it. And so, some examples of some really hot things that are happening right now. There is legislation right now that looks at capping the amount of state land that we could own in Michigan. And it's a bill that is focused, I think, on issues that are in the UP, but it's not taking into account the fact that in southern parts of the state, the biggest problem that people say, the biggest impediment to getting outside is access. So is this bill really the right solution when we haven't really looked at, what people need down in the southern part of the state where our population hubs are? Another really big issue that it's funny that this is coming to a vote tomorrow, considering that we have the firearm deer season coming up, is a bill that the federal government has told us will lead us to be in diversion of all of our federal funds that come to support hunting, that come to the state to support wildlife and natural resources management. So that bill is House Bill 4684. And the House is looking at voting on it tomorrow. So we have the letter from the federal government that says we'd be in diversion on the back table. We can talk about that more if people are interested. But those are the types of issues that we're focused on. Also, earlier this year we passed the Hunter Heritage legislation, which really expanded the ability for youth to get out and engage in hunting. And so that's another really important thing to our members. So we're very excited as we get close to November 15th. Our members are thrilled and passionate and out there in the woods already, and it's just a really great time for us to be celebrating our conservation traditions. And hunting, fishing, trapping brings into this state $6.7 billion annually and provides almost 100,000 jobs in this state. So it's important to our economy as well as our conservation heritage.
Randy, you can use the podium.
Thank you, Tony, and appreciate that. So being vertically challenged it helps me out.
That's not what it meant.
No, thank you, Aaron and Tony, as well as MUCC and all your affiliate organizations for hosting this. We think it's very important to put a spotlight on the fall firearm deer season. It ranks way up there in this state as one of the biggest activities that's going on, up there with college football and all those other great fall activities. But last year, in 2010, over 650,000 hunters spent 9.6 million hunting days out in the field deer hunting. This has a tremendous economic impact on this state. The average hunter spends almost $900 a year on hunting equipment, and that's related to food, gas, food, and equipment, as well as lodging. So it has a tremendous economic impact on this state, nearly over $500 million that our firearm deer season brings into the state of Michigan. And this creates jobs, it provides economic opportunity, and a lot of people say that the 2 weeks of firearm deer season in many of our small businesses in the state, it equates to the Black Friday after Thanksgiving in bringing economic impact into those small communities. So we really understand, we really appreciate what it does for our state's economy, but it also gets people outdoors, and that's what we're all about, trying to get people outdoors to make sure that they can enjoy the wonderful and abundance of natural resources that we have in the state. One of the things I do want to point out, though, over the last 10 years, we've been seeing about a 1% decrease in the number of hunters as well as anglers in this state. And our department is working on an aggressive program to get people outdoors, to get people to enjoy the natural resources so that we can see those numbers increase. hunting is a great tradition in the state. It's something that many families spend time together. I was in the Detroit airport on Saturday. I met a man flying back from Japan. He hadn't been home in 2 years. He said his father had been ill, but he chose the 2 weeks of firearm deer season to come back to see his family and to see his father. And he said the reason he was doing that is that most of his great memories with his father was in deer camp. So that kind of lets you know it's a great sporting event, but it's also a social event, and it's also an opportunity for families to spend time together. So we are in the Department of Natural Resources is looking forward to a great season this year, but we also want to make sure that all of our firearm deer hunters have a successful as well as a safe hunting season. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Stokes and Aaron. Appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak to you about the impact that I think there's a synergy between outdoor recreation and tourism. One that I think has been unrecognized for many, many years. So I think this is the first step of our two organizations beginning to partner actively in a means of growing that synergy and to the mutual benefit of both outdoor recreation and tourism. But you know, in terms of hunters and hotels during this season, oddly enough, today's weather, kind of cool and rainy, is probably good for hotels. Some hunters do stay in hotels, but the vast majority have their own camps and own bases that they're staying in. There are a few hotels that offer you know, hunter specials. Those specials get taken up on more readily when the weather's like this. If it's cold and rainy versus very cold and a lot of snow, folks tend to stay in camp. But it's the delayed impact that outdoor recreation has on tourism that I think I want to spend a little time talking about, because that's by far the greater impact. As we hunters travel to our camps, we hunt in Cedarville, north of the bridge, and you know, on the way up there, we're passing all sorts of different tourism destinations, making mental notes of where we might like to come and snowmobile, where we might like to come back and ice fish later that same winter. Also, as we begin to look further down the road into the seasons that are a little bit warmer, we're looking at golf destinations and summer recreation destinations. So the more that people, hunters, trappers, fishermen, ice fishermen, and the like are out in the field, the more beneficial that is to the overall tourism experience in Michigan and the growth of our industry. Ours is a $17 billion a year industry in terms of overall economic impact. And the more that folks get out and experience all that this state has to offer, the greater the benefit it is to MUCC and outdoor recreation in general, and the greater the benefit it is to Michigan's tourism industry. I would be remiss if I didn't make mention of the Pure Michigan campaign, because obviously that national cable TV buy maintains contact and rapport as we reach out into 49 different states and talk to them about the very attractive destination that we call our home state, Michigan. We're also maintaining contact with that in-state resident base and encourage them to get out and about and experience everything that Pure Michigan has to offer. So it's a plus for outdoor recreation and all the things that occur in that venue. It's a plus to Michigan tourism, and we're just happy to be a part of today's press conference. Thank you.
All right, we will open it up for any questions. Whoever wants to start, just let me know. I know that the opening comments are broad, so I'm sure you have questions. So let's start off. I actually will kind of start it. I would like to have Brent just give us an overview. What do you expect out of the gun season? That's what everybody wants to know.
Sure. And Brent, if you could come over to the podium.
Sure. Yeah, as we heard mentioning, the firearm season is the biggest things that we have going, both in deer hunting and hunting overall. We have about 700,000 people that buy a deer license each year, and we have about 600,000 of those that hunt with a firearm. So the vast majority of our deer hunters are firearm hunters. What we're looking at for this year is we've continued, excuse me, for this year, we've continued to see a couple of pretty mild winters in a row in both of our northern regions. So we have deer numbers that in the long term have been declining a little bit with habitat conditions in those regions. They're kind of rebounding and on the way back up. We've been hearing a lot of scattered reports about the number of deer seen earlier in the seasons up to this time, and a lot of that has to do with what kind of natural food conditions deer are responding to and so forth. So we've seen one of the crops in particular is apples have been abundant almost everywhere they are in the state this year. So folks that are hunting around old apple orchards and things like that tend to see more deer concentrated together. But acorn crops, for example, have been pretty poor this year. So your go-to place where you're used to seeing deer honing in on those resources might be a little bit quieter for folks this season. In southern Michigan, we've had pretty stable, abundant but stable deer for the past 5 to 7 years or so. Almost half of all our deer in the state are here in the southern region. And again, the emphasis in the south is trying to see what we can do to help provide access. We have been trying to reinitiate efforts on our hunter access program with grants available to have more private land enrolled to give open public access in the southern region. So Michigan has kind of transitioned from a time when it used to be you had to go north to hunt deer, even just a few decades ago, to where now over the last few decades we've seen such a surge in deer numbers in southern Michigan. Sometimes from some very different traditions have developed around staying in the south and hunting in this region. So we're looking forward to a lot of success and good times out there in the firearm season. We're trying to remind people all the time there's plenty of seasons for deer hunting. There's plenty of opportunities for small game hunting and other things too that sometimes our very focused deer hunters have a tendency to overlook some of these other opportunities that they might be interested in learning a little bit more about as well.
Other questions?
Go ahead.
I'm gonna grab one off our Facebook page here. If someone else has a question while I'm doing this.
I do, actually. Good morning, everyone. I'm Darren Warner. I write an outdoor column for the Battle Creek Enquirer, and I'm actually here also for the Michigan Outdoor News. Director Stokes, I haven't had the privilege to meet you yet, so I look forward to talking with you.
Nice meeting
you. More. My question, though, is could you give us all an update on the legislation that's been proposed to dramatically increase the fines for illegally baiting, and where does the DNR stand on those proposals? Are they in favor of them or against them?
Yes, our department, in particular Department of our Natural Resources Commission, has been working with the legislature to try to increase the fine and as well as put a little more teeth in the fines on deer baiting. We, as a department, know and understand that baiting is one of the ways in which disease is transmitted in the wild, amongst our wildlife and stuff. And so, but the commission came back, which will allow some form of baiting this year, but the form that has been approved by the Natural Resource Commission, anyone that goes beyond that, they wanted to try to make sure that they were put fines in that would discourage people from baiting, or I should say over baiting, or whatever you may want to call it. But we're in support of the legislation, and we have worked with the legislature and drafted that, and we hope that we will get passed.
I'm Lindsay Van Holy with the State Journal. Question I have is looking at this firearm season in particular, are there specific numbers that you can give on how many people have already purchased licenses and how many of them may be maybe youth?
We don't have youth. I don't know. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't think I have the numbers off the top of my head, but what we have, we do track. A lot of license sales actually occur just prior to the firearm season opening. So this weekend, we expect there'll probably be a big surge in the numbers that purchase. What we've been seeing over recent years is Michigan, like a lot of states, has been slowly losing hunters about 1% to 2% or so a year. We're on about that pace that we have been for license sales to date, based on those past years. So this weekend, we'll see what kind of bump we get to increase the number of sales overall. We'd also expect that our firearm season, of course, has a November 15th opening date, and that rotates through days of the week. Next season, for example, that'll be a Thursday opener, and that's often a great one for tourism in northern parts of the state, where folks can take a day or two off and travel and extend it, turn it into an extended trip as an opportunity for them. Despite that, our hunters are so strong on tradition, they really enjoy that tradition of November 15th, as Director Stokes mentioned. You know, it's not just the memories of traveling and being with your family in camp, it's something about that being like a holiday, that it's celebrated amongst the community overall. So that's one other reason why we sometimes tend to see fluctuating numbers in terms of the number of people that participate in any given year. The youth, you know, what we have been able to see is in the last few, over the last decade or so, we've basically been pretty consistent with the proportion of young kids that go deer hunting. That's one of the things to focus on. You want to obviously look at the number of people that are pursuing hunting, but we also look when we're trying to evaluate by age, well, what percent of Michigan residents of different ages are participating in deer hunting. And it seems like some of the youth recruitment opportunities that we've put in place have been able to at least stem off any reduction in that participation. What we don't know is trying to create good recruitment opportunities for young hunters. So not just getting them out there, but having them be with an experienced mentor that really gets them an excellent experience. Why that's important is we want to see those kids continue to participate. We often actually see a big decline as people enter their 20s and 30s, and life becomes a little bit more complex for them to balance other competing demands. It's not as easy to have dad or mom or grandpa take them out and get them outside. They need to have a great foundational experience so that they'll make that a priority as they age through life and continue to place a big priority on that. So I think that's where a lot of our interests are in exploring these recruitment opportunities, is seeing it's really generations down the road that we hope that they pay dividends, and we've seen some positive things so far and we hope that'll continue. Dan?
That was a wonderful answer.
We do have one Facebook question for Dean. They're asking the proper way to tag their deer. Specifically, they're asking what's the proper way to tag a doe, but maybe just a general overview of what the laws are and you know, your recommendations for after they shoot a doe, particularly first time hunters, buck or doe. What do you like to see done?
Okay, there are specific places where you're supposed to tag your animals, either in the jaw or around the leg. I think I'll speak for Wildlife Division 2 here, is that if you look in the guide, there's an example of how to put your tag on. Okay, it's very important that when they put the tag, or they fill the tag, they fold it over and it's flat. What we see is a lot of folks will take, especially on a buck, they'll take that tag and they'll mash that tag around the antler. And the problem we have with that is when our folks in Wildlife Division are trying to get the data off and they're trying to scan those numbers, they can't get it. It's kind of like going to the grocery store and the loaf of bread's all crinkled up, they can't scan it. So it needs to be clearly put on the animal so that it's, you know, if it's a buck, tied around the antlers. You know, a lot of folks will take a zip tie and put their tag around it, and after they validate it, then they zip tie it. Use a piece of string, you know, something that's going to be secure. A lot of folks over the course of time, if they don't put them on real tight, especially if they're hauling them on a vehicle, they'll have a tendency, possibility to blow off. So visible, you know, an antlerless deer is a great way to do is put a slit in the ear, through the ear, with a zip tie or again a string. But mainly, importantly, make sure it's filled out, validated, you know, before they do anything, before they after they harvest the animal. Then be sure that they put it validated, put it on the animal. Then they start, you know, the field dressing process.
Any questions from the media? Darren, I know you had more. How do you know that?
You always do.
I do, yeah, this one's actually for Brent. I know that, you know, over the last several years, we've had an overabundance of deer in southern Michigan. What more can we do to reduce that herd?
Yeah, in southern Michigan, we've made efforts to kind of streamline and create easier opportunities for folks to take, especially antlerless deer. So one step we took a few years ago was combining the vast majority of our southern Michigan counties into a single deer management unit. And that was important for a couple of reasons. We don't constrain antlerless licenses. There's an abundance of licenses available by quota. But we heard more and more from people that might hunt a couple different properties. You know, maybe they hunt 3 or 4 different counties. They want to take 1 or 2 antlerless deer, but to be able to take 1 or 2 from any of those counties, they have to purchase 10 or 12 antlerless licenses. They weren't willing to do that. So we've actually done some things that that have some impacts for revenue for us. You know, in that scenario, someone can now buy 2 or 3 licenses and use them anywhere around the region. But it's adding that management flexibility that we do need to have an important emphasis on appropriate management of the deer resource. In terms of additional things that we can do, it's clear we want to engage with our hunting community a little bit more and understand what it is that their expectations are out of deer hunting. And a perfect example is that it's not very common to hear a lot of hunters say they want to see fewer deer where they hunt. And if you take a lot of antlerless deer, that's the goal, is we're trying to reduce deer numbers. But they will say they'd like to see buck to doe ratios balanced, or they'd like to see more bucks or older bucks. And so what we're trying to do is educate folks that as you're harvesting from your deer population, you're changing that composition as well as the size. And so someone that wants to see more bucks should have an easy opportunity to buy and use an antlerless license in the region, and pass those bucks, let those bucks go by, so that they can have a little bit more control over their hunting experience, while also helping to meet the department's goals to reduce some deer numbers in areas where we can minimize some of the impacts. So we're trying to be more engaging in some of those efforts. Another step to that is forming regional deer advisory teams.
Can you give us a status on that, please?
Yeah, we've sent invitations out for each of our 3 regions, so some of them have met already, others have simply had the invitations to be formed. And each of the lower peninsula teams in the northern lower and in southern Michigan will have a first meeting post deer season, so early into the calendar year, to start to set the agendas for the kinds of issues they would like to be engaged in working with us for providing recommendations to the division and on up through the department, and if there are regulations issues through our Natural Resources Commission and so forth.
We actually have a good follow-up question on Facebook that maybe Russ could tackle from a media member, Mike Avery. He's asking, what is the long-term plan for Michigan's deer management program? Is there more leanings towards quality deer management? Just, an overall long-term, where are we going with this?
Well, I'm going to say 2 things. First one's got absolutely nothing to do with that question. Because I'm promising myself every time I have an opportunity like this, I'm going to deliver a message. That message is as follows. People talk about, I get a lot of folks contacting me and they'll say, I'm a taxpayer and you need to do this. Well, it turns out, or that. And paying your taxes keeps you out of jail, but it does not do anything for conservation in the state of Michigan. Literally, all conservation in Michigan depends on hunting licenses, fishing licenses, and excise tax on hunting and fishing products. All of it. Salaries, gasoline for tractors, habitat work, regulations work, the whole 9 yards. And so the message I want to deliver to people right out of the gate is, if you hunt or fish, buy more than 1 license. If you don't hunt or fish, buy a license. If you just sit in your house and watch game shows but like the idea of the outdoors, buy a license, because that's how we fund natural resource conservation in the state of Michigan. That's it. That's the whole 9 yards. Now, going to the question that was asked, are we slouching towards quality deer management? To some extent, I think we probably are moving in that direction a little bit, because people continue to ask questions. They want to see more and bigger bucks. We're in a sort of a transition state right now, because people say, I want to see more deer and I want to see bigger deer. Well, you can have one or the other, but you can't have both. And as time is going on, more and more people are saying, I want to see bigger deer. So we are very supportive of voluntary deer co-ops. We're very supportive of people thinking about those things. This is one of the reasons that we have our deer advisory teams, so that we can begin thinking about how we might do things a little differently in the state of Michigan to provide more opportunity and more high quality opportunity. Different things for different parts of the state, by the way. What constitutes QDM in southern Michigan is going to be way different than someplace else. A 2-year-old deer in southern Michigan could be big relative to something you'd see in the Northeast, for example. So there are going to be different solutions. But I do believe, and I am very encouraged by the fact that QDM, those kinds of groups are becoming more active and collegial cooperative with the department as we try to do something for deer in our state.
Any other questions, media? Darren? Come on, you have more, right? Okay, I have another Facebook question. I'm not sure who this to address this to. Let me pull this up. Perhaps Rodney or Russ. Let me get this right up here. I just heard about the possible loss of federal sportsman dollars if legislature passes HB. What does that say? 4684. What's this all about? Why would the legislature pass something like this?
I can try to answer that, and if Russ want to add something, he can. House Bill 4684, it's basically it deals with equestrian use in the Pigeon River Country State Forest. Traditionally, we receive our federal funding from the Fish and Wildlife Service. As part of receiving that federal funding, we have to, Michigan had to pass what was called assent legislation that said to us that we would work with the Fish and Wildlife Services on managing our state land. They have a say in managing the state land because we're using those federal dollars to manage those state lands. The Fish and Wildlife Service came to the Pigeon River Forest and saw that equestrian use was being used more than what they felt it should be. And so they asked us to kind of scale back, and that we're in the process of doing that. But the equestrian riders that were using the Pigeon River didn't like that, didn't appreciate that. So they have gotten legislation introduced. I think the legislation is being introduced by Representative McMichaels from the Traverse City area, McMasters, I'm sorry, from the Traverse City area, which basically says that equestrians or horses can be rode in the Pigeon River in all the places they have traditionally been ridden in the past. Didn't give a time frame, so basically what that legislation is saying that they could kind of go anywhere. And so that is against what the federal government, as well as our department, agrees with and stuff. So the legislation as written would put us in diversion of those federal funds. We've tried to work with the legislature to get the language changed or either tried to get them to not pass the bill. We are working on trying to develop trails within the Pigeon River that not only we think are appropriate, but we also think the federal government feels would be appropriate. And if we were given time and this legislation is not passed, we can deliver on that commitment. However, if this legislation is passed, Michigan could lose upwards to up to $25 to $30 million, and that would dramatically impact fish and wildlife in this state because we depend on those funds for managing this department, as well as managing the land and the natural resources of the state.
When I think one important thing to add about that is that it's not just, it's the Pittman-Robertson, which are the hunting dollars, but it's also the Dingle-Johnson sport fishing restoration dollars, and it's the dollars for hunter safety. So you're talking about all three pots of money, which are some of the only dollars out there to promote all of these industries, from sport fishing to hunting, and then the safety implications, which I know coming up on deer season is something that we're all talking about, that those are all in jeopardy with the passage of this one piece of legislation that they're voting on tomorrow.
This legislation, is it just coming up in the House, or has it passed the Senate yet?
It's just coming up in the House.
Okay.
I've got an unrelated question, but given what Russ talked about with all hunters want to see bigger bucks, and I think that as a whole, hunters want to do the right thing and they want to make sure that others aren't doing the wrong thing. My question is for Dean. What is the most common violation that you see during the gun season? And my follow-up to that is, how can hunters remain vigilant to report that, to make sure that others are following the rules and regulations as they are?
Okay, good question. I don't think I can give you a specific answer as what's the most common violation. Okay, the one specific. Our officers out there, especially during the firearm deer season, we want to promote safety. We also want to protect the resource. A couple of things that we look for quite a bit is the hunter orange requirements. Okay, I mean, it's been a long advocate. Hunter's orange saves lives. You know, when Hunter Orange first came into effect, we dramatically saw our hunting accident rates go down. It saves lives. Deer don't care about Hunter's Orange. We still harvest an awful lot of deer, so be sure you're wearing your orange. That and firearms and motor vehicles, they don't mix. Like, that's why it says, you know, you shall not have a loaded firearm in or upon a motor vehicle. You know, that includes an ATV, that includes a snowmobile, a boat, any type of motorized vehicle. They all have their specific regulations as to how to transport firearms. So those are two of the biggest safety aspects. Other things that our officers are dealing with are trespass issues, especially in southern Michigan, and also the past several years, or 3 years, when we've had a baiting ban in northern lower, we've had an awful lot of baiting issues. This year with the northern lower, the majority of it, other than the northeast portion of the state's open, you know, we are still having reports come in, but not as much because people are allowed to bait again, of course. Now, those are the common ones we deal with. What can hunters do? No, they can be our eyes and ears. You know, by no means do we ever advocate somebody going out there and taking enforcement in their own hands. Okay, but they can be our eyes and ears. We have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week report out poaching hotline that somebody can call, and they can give us information. You know, be diligent about what you see, what vehicles are being driven, how many people are in a party, what they're being dressed, you know, how they're being dressed, all those little details, and then call our hotline. That's the best and fastest way to get the information to one of our officers that's out in the field. And that number is 1-800-292-7800. So that's how our hunters can help us, because again, we're out there to help them have a safe hunt. That's our #1 goal, and then to protect the resource. But this time of year, you know, I mean, hunting in Michigan is a very, very safe sport. You know, and that's largely due to the 2,000+ volunteer hunter education folks that we have out there, making sure that our hunters are trained, and they're trained well. But by making sure that you're policing yourself and you're working with your own group that you're hunting with, you know, we'll make it safe. We'll continue to make it safe in Michigan.
While you're at the podium, there's one question you may be able to answer here from our Facebook people. He hunts near the Maple River State Game Area. Some of that state game area apparently is closed to hunting from September through December. He's wondering if those areas will be reopened, but more specifically, if he shoots a deer and it goes into one of those closed areas of the state game area, how does he go about getting the deer?
Okay, I can take part of that, and I think I'll
Please talk, what the question relates to is we are doing better for pheasants and waterfowl at Maple River. Part of doing better for waterfowl is giving them safe haven. There is area there that is closed during waterfowl season,
Okay.
but not in perpetuity.
Okay.
So he needs to actually go out and read the sign a little better.
Okay. So is it not closed? Those areas are not closed at all during deer season?
I believe they open up
Okay.
at the end of waterfowl season.
I mean, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay. So then the second question,
You scan this for any other good ones. Anybody here have any additional questions? Did you see anything good? This would be a good one for Russ. Meridian Township is doing a controlled deer hunt that hunters can participate in. Jackson's deer management program that they have is not open to hunters. I don't know that you know why that is, but maybe you could speak about just the general idea of controlled hunts within urban areas and what you would like to see with them, maybe what's available right now.
Well, there's, okay, let's start with the beginning. People are looking for alternatives to control too many urban deer. And they usually start that discussion, well, isn't there something non-lethal you can do? How about sterilants? Well, I worked for Wildlife Services for 20 years, and I actually oversaw their sterilant programs. Not options, they're not options. They just aren't options. They don't produce a dramatic change in animals. In fact, when you use those kinds of products, the recommendation is to drop the population using shooters or hunters to a certain level, and then try to use sterilants to keep it at that low level. And it doesn't work very well because the sterilants are leaky. So what we're really left with is people either learning to live with too many deer, trying to plant things that I don't know, they're electrified or they light up on fire if you try to bite them, or reduce the number of deer. And reducing the number of deer means that you're going to use hunters. Meridian Township as I understand it, through a pretty overwhelming popular support, has selected to have primarily archery hunts with very selected individuals, so it's just not open to everybody. And then I think that there is also one or two parks that are open to probably shotgun shooting.
There's one.
One,
Yeah.
but again, under very controlled conditions. That is a solution. We have places in Connecticut, for example, where there are controlled archery hunts in subdivisions on quarter-acre lots. So is it technically feasible? Yeah, you can do that. Is it socially feasible? Well, maybe not so much. You know, we aren't going to force our views on anyone. But we will certainly work with any municipality that chooses to work with us to try to manage deer. Because again, the way you manage deer, to be perhaps overly blunt, is to kill them. And if you don't want to kill them, you better learn to live with them, because those are your two options. It really is biphasic, black, white, night, day, 1, 2, on, off. Either kill them or live with them. There you go.
I can add just another important comment there. The other important thing is that different municipalities have their own restrictions and regulations. So Meridian Township is an excellent example where they don't have a firearm discharge ordinance, they don't have a hunting closure or anything that prohibits folks from hunting there. And what we worked very hard to do is provide the information to their township board about the fact that you know, it's your decision as a local unit of government if you think this is an avenue that you would like to pursue. It can be done, you know, effectively. We were able to provide guidance about safety zone regulations and other things. And they found themselves in a position to say by offering access on township properties to a number of hunters, they could increase the number of deer that would be taken, because those are a little bit larger properties that aren't going to have as many problems with safety zones. And then they also circulated information among their residents to say, you can hunt, and we encourage you to, and here's what you need to do in terms of getting permission for a safety zone, getting permission if you need to track a deer onto a neighbor's property. So we didn't have to do a lot of extra work there to be able to help them with their own issues, other than helping navigate through some of the layers of regulations and make sure they're aware of what options they have.
Brent, here's sort of a related follow-up to while you're up there. They're asking about what's being done to allow more people on private land in southern Michigan. You did mention you're trying to work with the Hunter Access Program. They even suggest if they want crop damage permits, they can get them in exchange for allowing hunter access, which I guess would be a variation of the Hunter Access Program.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of interaction of trying to figure out ways to just increase recreational opportunities, so the Hunter Access Program is an important part of that. You know, it's a difficult issue. We've looked at evaluating over time why we had a decline in the program, and a lot of it is simply because there's a variety of other things that go along with access that aren't unlike people that aren't receiving payments. What I mean is, if you leave a gate open, if you leave trash out on the property, if you do other things that just don't respect the private property owner, it doesn't matter how much you pay them, they might become intolerant of allowing you to continue to do that. So it's important for folks to realize, whether it's a Hunter Access Program property that they have access to, it's a friend or family member or anything else, you should treat all those folks the same way by being appreciative of the opportunity to have that access. And make sure you don't, you know, minimize your opportunity of getting that invitation again down the road. Obviously, with any of these issues for the Hunter Access Program, we're trying to look at this as a recreational opportunity. Obviously, it may increase the management capability that folks have on their property as well, but those aren't always the same thing. And what I mean is, we want to provide access for the Hunter Access Program to a place that provides a good hunting opportunity. So if someone just has row-to-row crops without many great places to hang a tree stand or be able to pursue deer, that might not be a place we want to enroll in the program and use those dollars to open it up. Those folks may be forced to deal more with just a damage situation where they want to address that specifically.
There's a couple other pieces to this that I think are important. One, it's important to know is the department actually has been fortunate enough to receive a significant amount of money in the last year to try to open additional properties to hunters, private property. And we put on a staff, whose role is to try to identify those properties. The way we're looking at it is to sort of a fee schedule. So much money for small game hunting, a little bit more, a different amount for deer hunting only. a larger amount for both, and so forth and so on. The idea is to try to recapture some of the opportunity there. And it's very important because if you look at what Michigan hunters do and what hunters do nationally, more than 70% of our hunters hunt only on private land, or almost exclusively on private land. You look nationally, hunters prefer to hunt on private versus public land. And they give a variety of reasons for that. You know, I'm the only person out here, I know the land, I don't have to, you know, whatever the reasons might be. And so it's very important to retention and to recruitment that we develop strong, vibrant, and expanding programs to get hunters private land opportunities. So there's that subtext as well that's very important to us.
We probably have time for one more.
I've actually got a follow-up question about your HAP program. I know last year I did some, I guess you'd call it investigative journalism, or pseudo-journalism. I called several properties. And in many times, the landowner put up roadblocks to hunters actually coming out. I was informed things like, even though there were 20 or 25 permits available, that, they had already had all the hunters they needed, and this is early spring. I was also told by some landowners, we're no longer participating in the program, even though they're listed on the website. What can hunters do if they run into these problems? Because obviously, there's some issues going on here.
Well, first, and not diminishing investigative journalism,
No, that's fine.
mostly these are apocryphal tales. You know, we have the genuine slop hunter, and there's some guys out there that would curl your hair. I don't know how many, but they're relatively few. And then you have some landowners that are just bad guys, and there's some of them too. But it's that middle bunch. Something that we lose sight of, I think, too often in this state is that we talk about our natural resources as being something that we cherish. We talk about Michigan as being a natural resources state, and we forget the fact that Michigan 120 years ago had none. Our rivers were polluted, you couldn't swim in the lakes, the trees were cut down, and all the farmland was eroded. In 120 years of love and participation by the agricultural community, the natural resources community, the Department of Natural Resources, we have reconstructed it. We are in that way are different than any other state in the nation. Idaho didn't have to rebuild the sawtooth. Michigan had to rebuild the forest, the pigeon. We put it back. And so I think what we need to do is less focus on how we get the bad guy than remembering that we all have a hand and a stake in having built something that is truly remarkable. And if we forget that, it can go away just as easy as we put it back. Didn't take 120 years to destroy it. What did it take? 20? Took 120 years to put it back. We're better now. We might be able to kill it off in 10 if we forget how we got where we are now.
All right, I think that wraps it up. If anybody needs to arrange some one-on-one stuff outside or anywhere else, come see me and we'll do that. Want to thank all the panel for participating. Hopefully you guys found it useful. I know there's been a lot of chatter on the social media, so I know if nothing else, you answered a few questions, and that's pretty important. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it. Appreciate it.
Closing comments.